2018 was the year everybody thought I died, or at least thought I was being held captive by a cabal of Australian YouTube game reviewers who only periodically let me out of my cage to do live streams. Sorry about that. This video will be simpler than the usual Examine Life of Gaming end-of-year review, but also, I think, much better. And at the end of the video, I'll fill you in on some channel stuff as well if you're interested. Let's do it to it. The Examined Life of Gaming Game of the Year is Subnautica. This is the most important part of the video, so I'm going to start with it. Subnautica was the best game I played this year, and close to the best game I played any year. In some ways, Subnautica is everything No Man's Sky should have been. Survival and exploration on an alien planet, discovering materials and animal species, enjoying pretty scenery, and listening to nice music. There are more than a few similarities, but where the comparison falls apart is that Subnautica doesn't fucking suck. Everything you do in this game matters. Resources matter, construction matters, exploration matters, time matters, because you have a clear goal. In No Man's Sky, you fall often into a loop of collecting resources so you can explore a new place to collect more resources in. Because it's so random and on such a macro scale, you sort of see everything in the first few hours and then just repeat it forever while you trudge through a whole universe of visually distinct but functionally identical planets. And when I say visually distinct, I mean color randomized, because of course it all looks the fucking same. Subnautica has nowhere near as much randomization, which is such a godsend. I have this theory that games can be expressed on three axes of art, design, and technology. An entirely art game, like one of those walking simulators, will be blissfully free of advanced technology or interesting game mechanics. A game that strays too far into design will be too complicated for its own good, and if it ever comes out, it'll be severely compromised and probably won't work. Meanwhile, a game entirely based on technology will be a programmer's wet dream but accomplish very little as a game. The legacy of a technology game is often an engine that is used by much better games that are design-focused. I'm not interested in the purely art aspect of video games any more than I am with film or literature. In my experience, 100% of art games are vanity projects. Yeah, no thanks. But let's take a look at the other two sides of this weird three-sided coin and check out the dissolution of id Software. John Carmack, John Romero, and Adrian Carmack were the three central figures of Doom. If I'm giving Tom Hall the shaft here, it's because he also got the shaft at id. Ironically, he didn't fit into the three-man band paradigm and got drubbed out. Still a legend, just not important to this analogy. Doom needs no introduction. It's great. It's Doom. But what happened to these three guys after Doom? John Romero formed Ion Storm, whose slogan was, "Design is law." And they made Daikatana, a game which had an enormous amount of effort put into the design. So much so it was a cluttered mess which barely even came out, and wasn't a great-looking game or a technological powerhouse. John Romero is a great designer, but unfettered design by itself isn't worth much. On the other hand, John Carmack, still at id, was freer to pursue his interests, and that led to games like Quake and Doom 3, which were very impressive from a technology standpoint, and kind of limp in terms of actual gameplay. Quake was the last hurrah of vintage id, so it wasn't bad by any means, and the multiplayer was something else. But Quake's legacy is the engine more than anything. Doom 3 was the same, only more so. Another iteration of industry-standard id Tech engine, and not much else, even if I kinda like it. As a funny afterthought, what happened to Adrian Carmack? He left id ostensibly to focus on traditional art, which doesn't have gameplay or technology at all. Man, I love coming up with these crackpot theories. How does this apply to No Man's Sky and Subnautica? Well, No Man's Sky is an algorithm and nothing more. It's an impressive math problem that, when solved, produces 5 quintillion planets. And the guy who made it, working for the developer whose name I've already forgotten, said, "Check out this sick algorithm." And as gamers we said, "Cool, so what can I do on these 5 quintillion planets?" And then crickets. It's a nice piece of technology with no art or design. No Man's Sky is, from the world to the gameplay, just an endless void of busywork. None of it means anything, none of it serves a larger purpose. There's kind of a story arc in No Man's Sky, but the layers build more slowly than sandstone, and it's so abstract and high concept, I defy you to give a shit about it. Subnautica, on the other hand, has a small story, with clear goals, interesting developments, and a real ending. This game is enormously satisfying. I loved the ending, and yet even after experiencing the full arc of the story, I still wanted to play more because the mechanics are satisfying too. This is a game you can easily beat, and I don't mean in the sense that it takes no effort or you don't have to invest time and thought. I mean it in the sense that you want to invest that time so badly that you'll blow through the game. I blitzed through it in a few weeks, playing constantly and racking up 40 hours. For $25, that's a ton of gameplay, and all of it was good, and I still want to play it again. As a measure of how engrossing Subnautica is, I never finish games. Seriously, quiz me out in the comments. Most of the time my attention span cannot sustain me through even the games I like. I'm not sure if it's a spoiler to tell you how the game ends, at least not any more than it's a spoiler to say the bad guys lose at the end of Halo or all the player characters die in a Call of Duty game. The objective of Subnautica is to get off the planet, and of course you know the game doesn't go on forever, so you do the math. Leaving everything behind at the end of this game is incredible. I was happy to leave because I had worked for it and because the game does a good job of getting you invested in the minimal story. But it's bittersweet because the game is so good throughout and because you're so attached to the work you put into everything. It's like Tom Hanks losing Wilson at the end of Castaway. He doesn't need him anymore, but it's still sad. And that's how I felt in Subnautica. I had put a lot of work into my sea base, and I had my Cyclops sub lovingly customized and outfitted for long journeys away from home. Leaving behind the sub that's been your home for 20 hours of gameplay made me more sad than anything that happened in Half-Life 2. I teared up a bit. I shut everything down, I let all the fishes out of the aquarium, I turned off the lights, and climbed aboard the rocket to leave. There's absolutely no reason to do that. The universe stops existing as soon as the game is over. My imaginary aquarium fish weren't even going to die in-game, but I still felt like I should let them out before I left because I was invested. Subnautica reminded me why I like video games. Interesting video game stories are nice. Inventive gameplay mechanics are sort of what I live for, but when games tell a story through gameplay, it transcends every other medium. Gameplay is what lets us experience a story in a way you can't with a book or a movie. After living in the world of Subnautica for 40 hours, you don't feel like the person watching Mark Watney taking off at the end of The Martian. You feel like Mark Watney. This medium is better than film. It's better than books. Subnautica is better than every movie ever made.
Time capsule jettison.
Oh, that's the most arrogant, incendiary thing I'm likely to say all year, and it's still January. The Examined Life of Gaming other game of the year is Kingdom Come Deliverance. Yeah, I can have more than one game of the year. There aren't any rules. I didn't really get invested in all the hullabaloo about Deliverance, except insofar as I thought it looked cool and I wanted to play it. So I did, and it's great. Deliverance is not quite a free roam Elder Scrolls RPG, it's a little more old school, with a long intro come tutorial that railroads you into the first few hours of story, like Fable, only bigger and different. If you drop into Deliverance expecting pure free roam, the first few hours of the game will be torture like no other, but I think it's worth it to build the world and the main quest. You sort of can't help but be invested in the quest when the first, 4 hours worth of it is mandatory to get to the open world part. The game is more structured than Elder Scrolls. The trade-off for that agonizing linear intro and a semi-restrictive game world is that the main campaign story is actually fun and the immersion factor is unmatched. Aimless wandering in Deliverance reminds me of Oblivion in the best way. Oblivion's overworld was designed very carefully to feel realistic aside from the occasional wandering Storm Agent arc, and that's why I think free roam in Oblivion works better than any other Elder Scrolls game. On the other hand, the main plot of Oblivion is pretty easy to ignore until you're max level, or just, entirely. Free roam in Deliverance is satisfying. There's cool stuff out there. I enjoy the mechanical pleasure of riding around, making food and potions, finding a place to sleep, and enjoying the game world. For some reason, the knowledge that I'm not going to encounter an imp shooting lightning bolts near an alien ruin is also very comforting. On the subject of sleeping, Oblivion fucking nailed it. In Morrowind you have to sleep to level up, but you can sleep anywhere, so it's almost like, why bother? In Oblivion you have to sleep in an owned bed to level up, meaning a house you own, or an encampment in the woods, or most frequently in a rented bed at an inn. In Skyrim you just hear a drum beat and pop open your menu. That game fucking sucks. Oblivion hits the sweet spot there. Yes, it's annoying that you can't sleep anywhere because your character can't own a blanket, but the side effect is that you spend a lot of time renting rooms, going into taverns, talking to NPCs you haven't seen before, discovering quest hooks, and over time becoming familiar with the different towns. Kingdom Come Deliverance is all like that. The specificity of the game's mechanics means you have to become familiar with things, and they become routine in a comfortable way. This ties back to Subnautica again, the concept of an immersive, enjoyable routine. No Man's Sky is a tedious, empty routine, like a work commute that never ends. Subnautica and Kingdom Come both have a background routine that makes you feel at home in the game world. Meanwhile, actually important gameplay and plot is still happening at the surface level above the routine. In terms of RPG mechanics, a lot of the quests in Deliverance are, again, like old school RPGs. You basically go to an area and talk to everybody about everything. A lot of the quests are just figuring stuff out via dialogue. To some extent, it seems like they were going for this sort of medieval detective feel, and it works very naturally. The combat gameplay of Deliverance is small-scale melee combat. There's no magic, the archery and stealth are of secondary importance, and there isn't really much dungeon crawling. So you have this sort of game flow that's like a wandering samurai show. You show up, talk to everybody, stab a bitch, and that's the game. One of the many reasons Skyrim sucks out loud is that most of the quests are dungeon crawls in a game with awful janky combat and schizophrenic level scaling. Deliverance has a great melee combat mechanic, but it knows how to use it sparingly, which helps it stay fresh for a lot longer. There are other innovative mechanics in the game, like mini-games for alchemy and weapon repair, or learning to read, which was done so well I wish my character could have stayed shitty at reading for a while longer so I could puzzle my way through difficult books. Oh well. Anyway, Deliverance nails the authenticity of the setting, which I think is what they were going for, and the plot and characters are engaging. It's good stuff, and I wish more people would make games like this. Even if the idea doesn't catch on, I think it was successful enough that Warhorse should be able to make more games. The Examine Life of Gaming third game of the year is Dusk. Look, I made up this stupid show. I can make up as many Game of the Year awards as I want to. Plenty has already been said about Dusk, much of it before the game even actually came out, so I won't really talk too much about what the game is. Suffice to say, it's spectacular. I love the music, the atmosphere, and the visual storytelling. Dusk is a buttery smooth, classic FPS, with really well-designed levels that have tons of interesting encounters, arenas, secrets to explore, and cool stuff to look at. You should definitely play this game. What I'll focus on instead is why the game is great. Last year I gave a somewhat tepid review to Strafe, a game that looks a lot like Dusk from a distance or if you kinda squint your eyes. Strafe and Dusk are both retrosploitation on the surface, throwback style, and visuals to the mid to late 90s, the heyday of FPS innovation. The difference is that Strafe's throwback nature is all on the surface. What made the golden age of PC games great was small development teams working on focused games with an attention to detail and dedication to gameplay. The low polygon count models and the individual pixels visible in every texture were a product of the time, and not the reason those games were awesome. That distinctive 90s visual style was adjacent to the game's greatness. It just happened to be there while games were great. So making a game in the modern indie roguelite style, but slapping some pixel graphics or chunky polygons on it does make for a very stylish game, but it doesn't make for a very good game, a la the smash hit shooters of the 90s. I mean, you don't find people replicating the wobbly vertex animations from Quake 2, because that shit was a side effect of engine programming and not a stylistic choice. I don't know. Give it a few years and maybe that will become aesthetic too. Quick question. How long before the macro blocking effect from badly authored early DVDs becomes a popular bit of visual flair for retro channels on YouTube? Now that's a rhetorical question. Anyway, Dusk has chunky and simple graphics, but for once it looks like a side effect. How can a small team with not a lot of money make a game this awesome and fun with levels this big and detailed? Maybe they have to skimp on graphics a bit. So Dusk is not only stylish in a throwback retrosploitation kind of way, but it also has tons of lovingly handcrafted content and plays really fucking well. Strafe had no handcrafted content, which means there were no memorable levels or memorable fights. There were no clever secrets, no spooky atmospherics in the levels themselves. It just kind of exists. This is also what I talked about earlier in the video when comparing Subnautica to No Man's Sky. Subnautica has enough of that personal touch that it makes No Man's Sky look vapid and pointless by comparison. Though to be fair, No Man's Sky looks vapid and pointless enough on its own. The Examine Life of Gaming Most Disappointing Game of the Year, also known as the Max Payne 3 Award or the Rockstar Games Award for Pretentious Bullshit, BattleTech. Yes, I said this video format was different this year, but I do love saying Rockstar Games Award for Pretentious Bullshit so much I think it might be my unofficial slogan. I think I was excited for BattleTech, but I can't remember specifically and it doesn't really seem like the kind of game I want to play, mostly because the BattleTech tabletop game isn't the kind of thing I want to play either. BattleTech is okay. I sorta like it, but it's certainly no Jagged Alliance 2 or XCOM. It seems semi-competent mechanically, but really uninspired. Like they got as far as deciding they wanted to do a really good computer version of the BattleTech game and then ran out of ideas. I'll grant you that it seems pretty faithfully translated as far as I can tell, but maybe it shouldn't have been. Both Mech Commanders and every Mech Warrior game had a lot more going on than this, and they treated BattleTech board game rules pretty indifferently. BattleTech has random missions without much individual personality, much like XCOM, but there's a lot less going on in the missions in BattleTech, so you never get the sort of organic stories and gameplay that XCOM can create. Jagged Alliance 2, on the other hand, was more like Mercenaries. It was very freeform, so even though most of the battles were not something the developers had created in advance, they were certainly a far cry from randomly generated missions. Here's this loaded and overused phrase again: emergent gameplay. Emergent gameplay is almost never what it claims to be. See, for example, every Arcane Studios game ever made. XCOM, though, had it for real. It was a game that could write its own war stories organically, and you could create mini missions without even realizing it. Like if a cyberdisk goes pinata and critically wounds half of your squad, and now you're trying to do your own CSAR operation and get the hell out of Dodge. The Battletech equivalent is one of your pilots dying, and then you pounding your fists vaguely at the Alt and F4 keys. Battletech is similar to other tactics games like Jagged Alliance or XCOM in that you recruit mercenaries and train them over time, and like a lot of those games, it has permadeath. But the way the game handles troop recruitment seems a little half-baked. Unlike in Jagged Alliance or even early Rainbow Six games, none of the people you recruit really have any personality. They're basically randomized names, faces, and stats. In that way, it's a lot like XCOM, FTL, or Bomber Crew. This isn't a huge deal, but it makes the permadeath a little less interesting. You have to go through a lot of interesting emergent stories before a randomized character starts to feel like a real person. Unlike in Jagged Alliance, Rainbow Six, or the MechWarrior Mercenaries games, the death of a lancemate isn't a huge deal. They are infinitely replaceable, and even though you lose the skills they had and have to train up a newbie, it's not a huge setback. However, unlike in XCOM, when somebody dies in Battletech, they take an enormously expensive piece of equipment out with them, so then you're double fucked. If you play XCOM long enough, and you don't save scum, you'll probably have a mission go all Mogadishu on you and have to replace most or all of a squad. For my money, that's the best part of the entire game, especially if you have a small squad of elite troopers equipped with the best power armor money can buy, and they get wiped out. That sucks and is awesome at the same time. It's awesome because of how much it sucks. I know that sounds crazy, but it's true. It's awesome because it presents a new challenge and because of how it makes you feel. First off, oh shit, my ace team just got massacred. How the hell are we going to recover from this, and how the hell can we beat these guys if they just destroyed my best squad? And secondly, if you've grown attached to the troopers you've been leveling up and buying new gear for over the last several hours. So you recruit a bunch of new fags to replace the old trips and head out on your next mission, without power armor and with a bunch of dummies who can barely hold a rifle. Instead of your elite squad of maybe 8 troops in jump armor, now you've got the Sky Ranger rolling heavy with 10 soldiers in basic Kevlar plus a rocket tank. That first mission after losing your whole squad is the best half hour of XCOM gameplay you'll ever experience. In Battletech you shouldn't even bother because it's actually impossible to continue after you lose a couple good mechs. The game becomes unwinnable, or at least so close to unwinnable that it's unfun. Battletech leaves me disappointed all around when it comes to lancemates. They don't have interesting personalities, so the only reason you want to keep them alive is that it costs you a shitload of money and time when one of them dies. Since lancemates are so easy to lose and completely necessary to have, I kind of get why they made them randomized instead of interesting. But Rainbow Six did a pretty good job of that, and I wonder if they could have implemented something like that here. In Rainbow Six, you have a pool of named rainbow operators with fully written backstories and different abilities. Rainbow Six does have permadeath, and you're very likely to lose at least some of them, but there are enough available that you don't feel the need to save scum every time somebody dies. That would make for a boring playthrough anyway. However, if you do lose all the unique operatives, you can still get unskilled recruits to flesh out the ranks. Battletech limits you to 4 active mechs. In every mission, it seems like the odds are stacked way against you, and you only get through because your pilots are so good and your enemies don't know how focus fire works. There is a challenge in tactics games with balancing AI intelligence versus AI realism. I talked about this a bit in my Max Payne and Fear Blowout video. Fear has AI that plays intelligently, kind of, but Halo has AI that seems real. The issue with Battletech is that it seems like the enemy AI knows it's in a video game, and therefore it does things that seem dumb in-universe but are smart in terms of raw gameplay. For example, I'd like to see enemies eject at high damage instead of fighting to the death. For the AI, there is literally no benefit to ejecting at high damage. The win state is killing the player, and if they have a turn available to eject, that means they have a turn available with which to do some damage. And even dealing a little bit of damage furthers their goal. But it's not always fun playing against AI that has no fear. It takes you out of the experience a bit when you realize that the AI will happily sacrifice all of its units to kill you, even though supposedly you're fighting against small-time pirates, or enemy mercs, or soldiers. Basically, there's never a feeling that you're up against a human bad guy. You're up against a human game designer. It's a tough balance to strike because you do want the game to challenge you, and in any gameplay context it never pays to be sentimental. Generally speaking, AI in tactics games doesn't really make mistakes. The AI might fail to take advantage of something because it's dumb, like how you're virtually safe from focus fire in most tactics games. But in Battletech you don't see the enemy get careless and overheat. or get lured into an ambush. It moves with algorithmic precision. It's clearly a contest between two chess masters floating in the sky, and not a fight between the pawns dealing with asphalt realities. Going back to that Halo comparison, the grunts in Halo are not smart, but they are believable. When they start to lose, they retreat, which serves no gameplay purpose because it doesn't help them defeat you, the player, at all. In terms of strategy, it's a 100% bad idea. But it's so much more engaging to play against an enemy that not only can recognize when it's about to lose, but also has a sense of self-preservation and a healthy fear of death. Anyway, I'm going to wrap this up because I can't think of a way to tie Battletech into Subnautica right now, and that's pretty much all I want to do. I hope you enjoyed this very special episode all about Subnautica. Thanks for watching, thanks for commenting, thanks to the Patreon people, and to the folks who hang out on Discord. Okay, so what's the channel update? It's nothing major, but you may have noticed that I closed down the Examine Life of Gaming website, took the Facebook page offline, and have pared down everything from credits to description links. It seemed pretty stupid to spend time updating unimportant crap like that when nobody uses it, and it certainly doesn't enhance the experience of watching these videos. The whole point of the channel is the videos, so I'll try to remember that going forwards. Don't get the wrong idea, I'm not saying I'm gonna all of a sudden have the free time to crank out tons of new content, but it should be easier to follow the channel from now on. Just subscribe. Hit the bell if you're afraid to miss an upload. I know it's a meme, but I actually started hitting the bell on my favorite channels since it's easy to miss stuff in the sub box. It's very nice of YouTube to offer a backup to their failing subscription algorithm. Cheers. Discord and Patreon are optional extras if you really want to go that extra mile. Alright, see you around. Halo's AI makes different enemy types seem dumb and real, or smart and real. In Battletech, it's a mixture of dumb fake and smart fake. It's kind of incredible that Halo could engender a sense of respect for an imaginary race of alien bad guys. Kind of like it's incredible that Subnautica could engender a sense of respect for some pets that don't exist. When I wrote the script, I couldn't think of a way to tie Battletech into Subnautica, but I just thought of one. I still like the way I wrote this originally better, so I'm gonna keep it. And I guess this will go in the outtakes.